Hello, everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of Older Man Living Life with Purity. And today we've got Alex Fiato back in the studio with us. Say hello, Alex.
Good to be with you today.
Good to be with you too, Alex. And before we came on the camera today, Alex had a couple of good questions, and I want to just kind of turn things over to him that he can take control of this particular episode here and ask a few questions. So, Alex, what do you got?
Thank you, Larry. Welcome to Older Man Studio today. Fact or fiction? A lot of questions have been coming up about Our Lady of America apparition. Different people that have been involved. Archbishop Paul Leibold, some of the nuns that were around with Sister Millie, Sister Mildred. There's been a lot of questions about what is this devotion? Who are the players? Who are the people? What's fact? What's fiction? Well, the only person that can answer those questions is the person sitting right next to me, Mr. Larry Young. So we're going to begin to take a look at and do a deep dive into Our Lady of America.
Now, I just want to preface something. Alex said, I'm the only person who can talk about this, but it seems that I'm the only person left who has been promoting this devotion to the administrative bishops in charge of something like
you're
this
the only one.
Since 2000.
Yeah,
my first meeting
right.
with Bishop Darcy, who would have been the fellow in charge of this whole thing, because it all happened in his diocese. Other people say, well, Cincinnati it happened too. It happened in other dioceses too. But the core elements of the devotion or the messages all took place in Rome City, Indiana in 1956.
Yeah.
And this has been decided and agreed to by all the theologians, all the bishops, everyone who's looked at it. And it's not a point of pride. It's just a point of fact that has to be.
It's a point of fact.
It's a determining point, and we have to make sure that that's known. And that's why the reasoning has been put in place by the church and the theologians since day one that this belongs in the hands of the Fort Wayne South Bend bishop.
Correct.
So that's how we got to that point.
So,
and with me being the last man living, who's been from the beginning.
If Our Lady wants it to be placed in the hand of a bishop, local bishop, and you've always said that.
It needs to be in the hands of the bishops.
Now, we have to ask a question. So why didn't they choose the bishop to do this instead of Larry Young? Chose him. And he had the consent. On top of it, he's saying, you want me to do this, you got to show me. And immediately they did. So I have no reservation about who the real expert is and who bared the brunt of the suffering and of the social crucifixion. And I don't say that lightly. This is the man that can explain the truth of Our Lady of America and the contemporary people that were involved in that. So,
well, you've been there all along, and I want to appreciate that because there's only been a handful of people that didn't walk away. You know, when the torment started to fly and the accusations started coming around, there were only a handful of people that didn't run away.
Well, nobody wants the heat, but
nobody wants to hear the bad news. But I tell you, there's going to be a lot of people aren't going to like some of the things they're going to hear that they thought were fact all this time, but were fiction.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Where do you want to start? What's your first question?
Well, this goes way back. I mean, I'll say from my experience, one of my friends said, hey, by the way, there was an apparition in 1956, Our Lady of America, and there's a guy that's come. His name is Larry Young, and so I got to meet this guy. I said, because my connection was with the mystical city and its involvement with Rome City. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, I knew this was big. It was huge, but I didn't know anything about it. I just knew enough that this thing is going to be off the chart. I called it the gold standard or whatever it is. So I met Larry, and Larry's there, and he's getting hit from all sides, different people that want, piece of his flesh, and wants the building, doesn't want to pay for it, and
oh yeah.
He's being inundated with, no, you got to run it this way, you got to run it that way, and
you're not doing it right. You got to do it this way because this is what they said to do. Well, who's they? Well, there was this. Everyone out there, it seems, when you get these cults inside of cults,
yes,
they're the most dangerous, I think, people to deal with.
Why is that, Larry?
Well, because they're so enamored with what they feel is that one piece of the puzzle, that one little golden nugget that's going to bring it all together. They're the ones who think that they've got the secret
The combination.
to the sauce. Right. They're going to be they got the white knight syndrome. We're going to save everybody. We're the ones that are going to put it across the goal line type of thing. But it really isn't.
So
Jesus does
What
that.
drives them to think that they've got a special place that they have to?
I don't know. It could be individual
Dump it on you.
to the person, but I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of people feel that they hold a superior position in the digestion of information, that they know because, I talked to this person. I had a woman the other day telling me about some sort of fictitious kind of thing about NGOs and bringing people into the country, and with this great immigrant thing we had going on, and all these Catholic charities running people across the border. And I said, well, they weren't vetting these people. They were just loading buses and, bringing them across and getting paid so much per load. And she goes, oh, that's not true. I know. I'm a Catholic. And I said, yeah, it was her response. She knew because she was a Catholic. I said, well, now we need to really talk.
So what was really going on with this transportation and these people?
Well, the U.S. government was paying these non-governmental organizations, these Christian groups or whatever, to go out and do their dirty work for them because the government couldn't do it. It was illegal to do. But it wasn't illegal for a charity to do it. So the government gave all this money to these charities and said, go out and do this. And then when they get here, they don't know where. I mean, we're still missing like 300 to 500,000
You're telling me that they were
kids.
part of the child trafficking?
They were part of the human trafficking. It all went together.
And they're rising up as Catholic.
Well, this is their virtue play that they want to say, well, I know because I'm a Catholic. So, but that just goes with kind of the problematic thinking of cults within cults.
Okay.
This superior arrangement type of thinking. And some of that played out in Our Lady of America too.
Let's go back to the very beginnings, even before you came on the scene.
Well, you have to go all the way back to the dates of the apparitions.
Let's talk about
that took place. That was in 1956, and before that, what you had was a young woman by the name of Mildred Neutziel, who had become a Precious Blood nun.
Yeah.
She'd entered the convent, I think, at the age of 13, and so she basically was an 8th grade graduate, and then went to live at the convent where she was schooled and tutored there. And mostly the things that she was schooled and tutored on there would have been of more of a religious nature, spiritual type formation and things like that. Anyone who knew her knew that she wasn't a math whiz. She wasn't heavy into the sciences and things like that. But she was more of a person that had depth of heart, I think is what people said. She was much like a child, and that's what the people who knew her from their brief stint when she was in Rome City, some of the people that knew of her, she didn't stand out. She didn't desire to stand out, but she didn't really have a place in the adult scheme of things. As far as interacting with adults, she felt kind of uncomfortable about that, is what they said. So they lined her up to be a kindergarten teaching assistant and teacher at a nearby school. Each day she would go over to Ligonier, and she'd be run over there by a fellow by the name of John Hastrider, would drive her over each day and pick her up and bring her back. And that's what she did. It wasn't for the longest time, but it was what she did.
And how long was she in the order before she got the apparition in 1956?
I don't know exactly. She probably was in there for, nearly 30 years. She'd have probably been young, mid-40s when she had her apparition in 56.
Gee.
So she'd probably been in the order, she'd been with them since she was like 13. So 30 years, basically, she'd been instructed and living, with the Precious Blood Sisters and doing her work in 56. That would be about right.
So when she got the apparition, what was the message? Was there a message to her, or how did Our Lady appear to her, and what was...
Well, she appeared first during a holy hour she was having, and Our Lady first appeared to her, as I understand it, as Our Lady of Lourdes. So this is how Our Lady does a lot of times with, first timers to the apparition business with her, she appears first as a recognizable, established identity.
Okay.
So to show.
And they were dedicated to.
Oh, I had a heavy devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes.
Okay.
So there was Our Lady of Lourdes was down at the grotto. Our Lady of Lourdes was on the sides of the of the chapel and the side altars and things like that. Yes, the Precious Blood Sisters had a very rich and deep devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes, and then with the healing that came out of the Lord's potential, those promises. And that's what the Sisters of the Precious Blood at this facility, that was their mission, was one of about healing, and physical healing.
Did they have a lot of the physical healings here during her time?
Well, they were very successful at practicing medicine at that time. I don't know if they were all miraculous healings, but I do know of one documented miraculous healing. It was the first one that happened, and I believe that was in 1915 with a young woman by the name of Marie Reparata, Reparata, and I think she was a Colombian girl. Her mother brought her and I think one or two of her younger siblings to the United States, and in the early, like 1910 or thereabouts, ish, there was a great wave of immigrants were coming in at that time too. And so her mother brought the kids, and they ended up being in the Michigan area, and it wasn't long, and Marie's mother died, leaving her and the children as orphans. And so Marie wasn't of the age of majority at this point. She wasn't 18 yet. So she and I think the other siblings got sent off to an orphanage, and I believe that was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Well, Marie ends up getting quite ill, and they don't see anything is going to help her cause. And so the sisters who had her up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, they shipped her off to Rome City because they knew that there was this healing center there, that these Sisters of the Precious Blood had a good record of at least palliative care, for those who were, sick beyond help, they could at least help make things comfortable. So they did servants' work there, the sisters did. They did a great job. Well, anyway, they ended up getting this Marie Reparata there. Marie's mother had taught her very strongly about to have a devotion to the Blessed Mother. And one in particular was to Our Lady of Lourdes. And so this young girl having such a strong devotion in that regard, and with the sisters trying to make her little life or young life, as appealing as possible, and what they felt was her final stretch. They set her up in a room that was the only room in the entire building of 187 bedrooms.
It was open?
It was the only room that had a view of the grotto that was down by the hill.
Oh.
So it had a direct shot right down the walkway that would walk people from the building down to the hill.
Our Lady of Lourdes.
Where Our Lady of Lourdes was sitting and waiting.
Wow.
And so this young girl could look out her window and see Our Lady, 400 yards away.
Nice.
Okay, so it was always, she couldn't walk to it. Physically, she was incapable. And all the guests and people around the facility knew of the plight of this poor young woman who was at death's door.
Wow.
And so they were all kind of wondering
what's going to happen.
What would happen. Well, one of the visitors, the guests who was there, and when priests were allowed to come and stay there, the sisters allowed any priest to come and stay for free. They'd be treated like kings. They could have breakfast any hour of the day. This was their, their great, come on. You can have breakfast any time, sleep in all you want. But we do ask that you say a mass each day and offer to hear people's confessions if they want to have their confessions heard. So that was the only things that these sisters asked of these priests to do.
Well, that's nice.
Two things they probably want to do anyway.
Right.
Okay, whether they're on holiday or not. So these priests had this basic, contractual obligation was to say Mass each day. And the joke around the place at that time was, go ahead and finish your breakfast, take your time. You're never late for Mass here because there'll be another one starting in 15 minutes. Because there would be as many as 13 to 15 priests staying at this place at any given time because it was the place to be.
Right.
So this one woman was there and this one priest was there, and they had a discussion going on, a friendliness about them. And the young priest kept asking this woman if she would like to have her confession heard. And she kept saying, no, thank you, but no. And this young priest kept after her, kept offering because he was looking to try to pay his bill. And so apparently, there's so many priests around there, but he's in competition with the other guys. I got to get a hit on my record here.
Right.
I got to get a couple confessions under my belt here. They're going to kick me out. I'm going to have to start doing dishes.
They'll never invite me back again.
So anyway, if everyone's paying attention or understanding and praying for this young girl upstairs, this Marie Reparata. Well, they had a chaplain working at the facility at this time, and he was working under Father John Knoll, because John Knoll was the actual spiritual director for the entire facility.
Okay.
So this was one of his duties he took on when he decided to help these Sisters of the Precious Blood build this place. He had to stay on as business advisor and as spiritual director. So they had a permanent spiritual director in Father John Knoll.
Oh.
So 1915, he's been a priest now for about 15, 16 years, Knoll has. But he's got another Precious Blood priest in there, and his name is Father Max Walls, W-A-L-Z. No relation, I don't think, to Tim Walls up in Minnesota, but thank God for that.
Really?
So minor miracles. Hopefully we don't find out something down the way. There was something in the woodpile. But so Father Max Walls, and you can look him up, outstanding guy. I think he was there for almost 20-some years. But he's making a sick call on young Marie Reparata in her room. And he takes a stone from his pocket that he had taken from the actual shrine at Lourdes. Just a little pebble that he carried with him.
Now, this is a doctor doing that.
No, this is a priest doing
A priest,
this.
okay.
Okay. And so the doctors are treating them with water flushes and things like this,
Okay.
herbals. So she's getting all of that, but it's basically down to palliative care. They're helping this girl.
Is that right?
They
Knew it was going to be over with.
No one. She was there for a reason.
Okay.
And they weren't able to help her, so they were going for the last-ditch effort there. So Father Max pulls this pebble out of his pocket, and he touches it to her breastbone as he's praying over her, asking for Our Lady's intercession to heal this young girl. But he asked for her to be healed, not for her benefit, but for the benefit of her younger siblings, that she can be there to help raise them.
Very good.
With the lack of their mother. That's a key element of seeking intercession in prayer and healing.
Now, why is that, Larry? That's a key.
Because it's not about you.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. It'd be about you being able to offer more help and graces to others along the way. Your life is, it could be over after you take your first breath.
Right.
Your life is not committed and not guaranteed. All right? And you have to quit being so enamored and so possessive of your life. Because when you do that, you're discounting and you're keeping God at bay.
Right.
In the spiritual side.
Absolutely.
Because you're saying, I'm more important. I need to live.
Right.
Well, why do you need to live?
No kidding.
Well, because I'm afraid to die. That doesn't help. Because if you're afraid to die, you don't understand what's waiting for you on the other side.
Okay.
And I'm not saying for anyone to go out there and rush to die. I'm just saying don't let the act of dying and the ending of your physical life here be a block to furthering your relationship with God.
Absolutely.
Because what you really want to be going for, we'll talk about that later on, is that divine indwelling of the Holy Trinity. Because you can't join the communion of saints in heaven until you obtain that.
Right.
So if you want to hold on to life and you want to fight it till the end, saying with my last breath, it's what are we fighting for? Why are you fighting so hard to live.
Right.
If it's for you, that's a selfish gain.
Yeah, really.
And, Jesus says, hey, I did it. You can too. It's not that bad.
So he places the stone.
So
from
Maxwell places a stone on her chest, asks for the intercession. She immediately gets up out of bed.
What do you mean immediately?
A flush of strength comes through her, as I was told.
What was her diagnosis? Do you know?
I don't know exactly
She
what
was
it was.
severely ill.
It could have been tuberculosis.
Okay.
It could have been a number of things.
But she wasn't walking. She's not going to walk.
Oh, she was
Her breathing was.
collapsed. She was
So this was instant.
instantly. She was reinvigorated with strength.
And then what happened?
She gets up out of bed, and she's like, "I'm fine. I'm fine." But she's still a little unsteady. But she gets up, and out of all the things you would think, well, I'd love to, have a bath. I'd love to have a shower, take care of the physical things.
I feel hungry.
The first thing she wanted to do was to get to that grotto and that statue
Oh, my goodness.
to go say thank you.
Wow.
So, with the help of Father Max Walls, she walks on her own that 400 yards from the building, and she had to come down 2 flights of stairs to get there first. So she walks down out of the building with Father Max Walls out to the grotto
To give thanks.
to say thank you. This girl was formed. Her
Wow.
mother got her right, and the nuns who she was staying with got her right, because she knew that it was that intercession that healed her. So she went to say thank you. Now, along the way, everyone's got their face pressed to the glass in that building. All the visitors, they're all talking. She's up, she's up, she's up. She's outside. And everyone's like, what do you mean? The girl.
The one that's dying.
Yeah.
Is
So
not
everyone's like freaking out.
Miracle.
What happened? What happened? She was dying. What happened? She's not dying. She looks fine. The woman who wouldn't have her confession heard, she went and saw it out there. And she says, I want to talk. And she went and got a confession. So this is one of the reasons I say that when the Blessed Mother,
Wow.
helps in bringing a healing, especially a physical healing to somebody. There's going to be more spiritual healings. But when she brings the help in bringing a physical healing to somebody, she's a true mother. She uses a coupon. She always gets a 2 for 1. And so it wasn't just the young girl in this
Being
case,
healed.
but it was this other woman
Healing
had a
her
spiritual
heart, her
healing.
soul, and going to
Right.
confession.
And realizing at that point.
I need to get straight.
Right.
With God.
So that's why I always say, don't always look for the physical healing, for that person. It's a wonderful thing, and I've seen enough of them. I've seen a lot of them. I'd love to see more. They're beautiful to engage in.
Absolutely.
But look around for the people who are the doubting Thomases to see how their reaction is when they witness this.
Now, Sister Millie was here at the time that this young lady was healed?
No, Sister Millie would only have been a couple years old.
At that time.
Right,
Okay,
this was
that's right.
1915.
Oh, that's right.
So Millie
Right.
was born probably about 13
Years later.
in 1913.
Okay.
And Father Havel was born the same year. So Father Havel and her were born in the same year.
So both 1913 is.
I think
yeah.
that was about 1913.
Okay, so the basis of
Could have been 1915. I mean,
what was called Night Springs, and they had doctors and they had
they had a
nuns.
doctor, and they had basically nuns who would practice the form of medicine that the doctors prescribed. And a lot of theirs was herbal.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Was teas. They grew their tea components on the properties, and they had poultices and things like this that they would use.
Yeah.
They would use water flushes, hot cold contrast treatments.
Absolutely, yeah. Those are still things that they recommend. What do they call it? It's a different kind of a healing.
Thermodynamics.
Homeopathic.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Homeopathic is part of using the herbs.
Yeah. Well, Lenny.
Beating with sticks usually gets it out. Too.
Lenny did a deep dive with Dr. Huelga Clark that said that.
You're talking about Len Saratsky.
Len Saransky,
Yeah.
my brother at night that passed away.
He was a brilliant guy.
Very brilliant. He said that this Dr. Clark said that she could clean up Parkinson's disease in a matter of 2 weeks and get him up and dancing. And she recommended, I think, clove, wormwood, and then green hull black walnut tincture. These are just bitters or things that poison the elements that are. So I said, are you kidding me? So Lenny tried to get a hold of, what's his name, that guy that played Back to the Future, has Parkinson's disease.
Michael J. Fox?
Yeah, but you couldn't get to him. There's just a shield around the guy. But at any rate, these things do work. But the spiritual thing is the real force of the healing of the soul. So this young lady got healed, but the big healing was from that woman that.
And everyone else who was watching that day, sure. All the other visitors. I mean, they had probably 200 or more visitors there that all witnessed this. They were all like quietly subdued, and they went from one moment of being like, oh my gosh, the weight of, we have a young girl dying upstairs.
Right.
How can we be happy?
Right. Absolutely. Sure.
I mean, what are we doing thinking?
Right.
How can we even be thinking about lunch?
Right.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, grace of God, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, here comes this like, who is that? Oh, that's the girl.
So
It can't be. She was dying.
The basis of this place is a place for God's love and mercy and healing.
I just think it's a spiritual sinkhole. If it's going to happen anywhere, it could happen there as much as anywhere else. I mean, I don't know, but I do know that it goes on. I didn't ask for it.
Well, I know I asked you about that gentleman that was blind, and when he came here, and I asked him,
the Jewish guy?
Yeah, I said, Larry, did you think he was going to get a healing? He goes, no, I didn't think he was going to get a healing. I knew he was here, but I'm not sure, where he was going with the thing, so I just suggested washing the water or what have you. And I asked Larry, did you think he was going to have sight? Immediately. He said, no. I didn't anticipate that.
Well, you're talking the story about the blind Jewish guy.
Yeah.
It was a couple showed up at the door one day. Typically on weekends, Saturdays, we were closed. I was working, obviously, though. And so I answered the door, and there was a couple there. And she did all the talking. And I realized soon into the discussion that this guy was blind. But I wasn't talking around him. I tried talking to him and tried to engage him that way, but he was used to being talked around. It's like...
Especially with his attitude.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the comedian Josh Blue?
Yeah.
The guy with cerebral palsy? He's talking about going out to dinner one time. He's got like a table of 8 people, and the waitress is going around, or the waiter is going around taking everybody's orders. Then they get to Josh Blue, and the waiter looks to somebody else at the table. And what will he be having? Like talking around him. And the guy says, well, he says, I don't know, but from what you just said, I think it's probably going to be a talk with your manager. So they ended up getting dinner for free, but that's how it goes. You don't talk around people. You talk to them, and this is the dignity and that kind of gets lost in our own insecurity about things. And a lot of times when people are insecure or uncomfortable in a situation, they'll try to protect themselves and end up talking around, the 800-pound gorilla.
Right.
Is sitting right there. But, that gorilla can order his own bananas
right
now, so you might as well get him what he wants. So, but the people and the things that have happened there went right with this couple that showed up. And I told you before, 9 times out of 10, the people who would show up there and would get the healing all had one thing in common, is they would all express, I have no idea why I'm here. And they would have tears in their eyes when they were saying it. Saying, I have no idea why I'm here.
Yeah.
And that usually, let me know that this was a God setup. And all I can say in those instances, it's best to not try to play an active role in that, just be responsive. Because God's got it all figured out. He doesn't need your help.
So we come from 1915, this beautiful healing here at the Springs.
Right.
And Knipe Springs after Monsignor Sebastian
Knipe, yeah.
So from that point, what area do we want to cover next in terms of some background?
Marie Reparata was just the first of the documented miraculous healings.
Okay.
And you can hear, I think there's an old website, I think it was called the Mustard Seed It was a group of, I think it was Jesuit priests had recorded this one years ago, and I think it's still out there online. You can get it, but Marie Reparata or Mary Reparata, I get it confused. She ended up going on to being a teacher in Detroit, and she ended up
Father Solanus' territory.
right.
Yeah.
And so they were out of that same area, and they ended up having a Motown group was so by the woman who took Marie Reparata's name as her professed religious name, they were so enamored by this teacher that this Motown group of girls called themselves the Reparatas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they had a big career. They were big in England, but they failed in the United States. But they were big time hits over in England. So the Reparatas, got their name because of
this lady
in Iraq being touched to her chest when she was a kid. But Father Max Walls, he's a good read. He did some good stuff. But yeah, this story about this one woman having a spiritual, I don't know if it's a conversion, but an awakening that happened. That she knew right then and there she was with sin, and she needed to get taken
sure,
care of.
absolutely, right, absolutely. She knew that she lacked, and she better get
right
with
well,
God.
and she knew in that moment that Jesus' reality, Jesus' healing is real, and it's going on all around you. Sometimes you're just not aware of it.
Oh, absolutely. I remember thinking not too long ago, when I fallen away from my faith, that, well, these miracles, they only happen when Jesus was here. I haven't seen any miracles, really, quite frankly, myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the stupidity that we hang on to. Because,
and it's kind of a hubris. It's because you think you've got all this knowledge about how things work. The doctors getting the God complex.
Right.
And things like this.
Right.
They don't allow any room for the Holy Spirit to
Right.
come in and assist.
That's right.
But my brother, I don't know if you ever met my brother Ken. He's a doctor in Indy.
I met him when we were down in Indy once.
Okay, you stayed with him that
Right,
time. Okay,
that's
I forgot about that. I wasn't there, but Alex and my mother and Jan stayed at my brother's home. I think previous to
coming to testify.
your testimony. Yeah, so I appreciate that very much. Well, they stayed with my brother. You met my brother. Well, my brother had a medical practice on the southeast side of Indianapolis for years. They ended up having to sell out with all the insurance changes that went on. But in each of his exam rooms, he put up a simple little thing that was a major difference maker for all the patients, and that was a simple crucifix. So he put a crucifix in each of the exam rooms he had at his medical practice. And I got to tell you, that was one of the most comforting things
people saw
to everybody. Whether they were, Christian or not, they knew that there was a man of conscience and a group of people with conscience that were working on them. There was a big difference maker in their thinking. And I think it probably had a lot in changing the positivity of their thinking about their treatment program. If they got bad news, well, I got bad news, but he had a really bad news.
He had some bad news, yeah.
But he had something good to say about it afterward.
Right.
So people can take these things as good. They can try to criticize it as bad, but in the end, it is what it is, and it's a positive thing.
It's a sign. Well, that was the sign that was the sign you got with the white cross, right?
Right.
It sold you, didn't it?
And then when they bought my brother's practice out, one of the first things they did was get rid of all the crucifixes.
Oh,
boy, I tell you, there were a lot of people who weren't happy about that. They were called patients.
Right.
So the patients weren't happy about the corporate decision, but the corporate stayed with what it was.
They pushed our Lord out of a lot of things.
No, but just the simple little things like that can change the whole dynamic of how people react to things.
So what was the destiny of Knife Springs? 2015, we got healings.
Well, we had
Father
the healings.
Knoll was the spiritual director of the priests and stuff that came here.
Right. He became a bishop then in 1925. He becomes bishop, and so he's got even more on his plate at that time, having to take on Notre Dame and a growing diocese that was going on. So, but the sisters are still plowing through. These group of precious blood nuns are taking on more and more and more responsibilities with more and more patients coming in. So I think that was one of the several factors as to why Our Lady chose this facility in particular to announce herself as Our Lady of America.